only have to look back a few decades to realize how much God has transformed the political landscape of Africa, from a period of continuous coups to a time now where democracy is widespread. My guest tonight is Mr. Fela Durotoye, a presidential aspirant in Nigeria, and we'll be asking the question, is democracy taking roots in Africa? This is Chimstalk Africa.
From Cape Town to Cairo and from Mogadishu to Dakar, this is Chimstalk Africa. And now here's your host, Chim Onyebilanma.
Welcome there, viewers. I'm your host, Chim Onyebilanma, and it's so good to have you with us this evening for this show. We have a lot slated for you, and this week we're looking at 2019 and the presidential elections and democracy in Africa, because 2019 is going to be a big year for presidential election across Africa. At least 12 countries in Africa will be holding their presidential election. That includes countries like Senegal, South Africa, Botswana, Nigeria, Namibia, Republic of Benin, and Malawi. My first guest is Mr. Honorable Collins Kajawa, who is a member of parliament in Malawi. He'll be joining me by video. Welcome, Mr. Collins Kajawa. Why are people not happy in Malawi? You said to me before we came up that there is so much discontent in Malawi. Why are people not happy?
Thank you. It's a good question. People are not happy in Malawi on account of the following. Number one, governance issues. Number two, the issues of poverty levels. Number three, issues of inclusion. Some individuals are not really included in key areas. And finally, it's the whole idea of failing to create equal opportunities for all.
Mr. Honorable Collins, you are a believer and you're also a preacher, a man of God, a Christian leader. Tell me, what is the church in Malawi doing about the situations you're describing?
Four things to hand. Number one, they are seriously praying for the situation in the country and conducting civic education based on the biblical mandate. Secondly, they have actually had to open a dialogue with the government, to talk to government, to point out issues for them to change. Thirdly, the church actually has been mobilizing its members and teach them, some small skills as a way of changing things. And finally, the church as well, together with the civil organizations, they participated in the demonstrations on 27th of April this year.
Now, Mr. Honorable Collins Kajawa, you're a member of the Malawi Congress Party, and Reverend Professor Lazarus Chakwera is your presidential candidate, and he's running to be president next year. Tell me, what are his chances in your view?
Good question. Reverend Professor Lazarus Chakwera indeed is a team leader for my Congress Party and is also the presidential candidate for the party. His chances, in my view and assessment, are actually much better than any other presidential candidate. I would peg him probably at number one in terms of scales of preference and the scales of equity. I would put him above 50%.
So you're saying invariably that come next year, you feel that Mr. Chakwera has the possibility of being elected as the very first born-again president in Malawi. Is that so?
Yes, this will be the first time to have, a born-again president. And not only that, Reverend Professor Chakwera was the president of the Assemblies of God Church in Malawi, and at a global level, he was also at a senior position And he's a man who actually believes in servant leadership to serve the people, make a difference, while they still stick to the word of God.
You know that many times in Africa, Mr. Kajawa, we have Christians, they're born again, they get into power, but when they get into power, it becomes something else. They don't line up with what they say they believe. How are we sure that this will not be the same case with Mr. Chakwera when he becomes president?
Reverend Professor Rosa Chakwera has an exceptional track record. Immediately, he obtained his degree at the University of Malawi. Because of his integrity and core, decided to go for theological training for 5 years. And after that, he moved on to serve the people. He rose to the position of presidency for the Assemblies of God in Malawi. He was the president for over 25 years. Nothing actually has ever come out in Malawi or even through his church disputing his integrity and leadership. And look at the current scenario in Malawi as the main opposition leader. The country somehow has picked morale, has just trusted this man, and not only that, people are looking into his practical things that he's been doing, standing with the poor, working with those that are lonely, uplifting the voices of those that cannot speak. And not only that, his actions actually have been speaking louder than his speeches. So we believe this is a man of God, and indeed he'll make a huge difference in the nation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Collins, for joining us. And I really appreciate your perspective and how you've helped us to understand better what is going on in Malawi. We'll be praying for that elections and praying for your party. All the best, and may God bless all of you over there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this interview. Likewise, I'd like to urge you to even remember Malawi and even encourage the global village to pray for Malawi, and find out that Malawi should be a model for Africa, and not only for Africa, but for those that believe in God. Thank you so much.
So viewers, that was Mr. Collins Kajawa. We'll be pausing here, and when I come back, I'll be interviewing Mr. Fela Durotoye. Don't go away. You would love what he has to say about democracy in Africa. See you. Welcome back, dear viewers, to this segment of your show, Chimstalk Africa. Like I said in the beginning, we're talking elections in Africa. And with me to talk about this issue of, is democracy taking root in Africa? How far have we traveled in this journey of bringing liberty and freedom to people to make choice as per who will be their leader? It's not other than a man who has raised up his hand as an aspirant in the next presidential election in Nigeria. It's none other than Mr. Fela Durotoye. Mr. Fela, you're welcome to the program.
Great to be on Chimstalk.
It's nice to have you, Mr. Fela.
I'm glad to be here.
Fela, you are a management consultant, you are a leadership expert, and you're also a nation builder. What do you mean by being a nation builder?
Well, I always say that nations, like houses, nations need to be built. And nations are built by nation builders the way houses are built by plumbers, carpenters, masons, and all of that. But nations are built by nation builders. And nation builders have 4 characteristics. I call them A, B, C, and D. They accept responsibility for the well-being of their nation, not just their own well-being personally or their family, but beyond that, they want their nation to do well, which means that to a nation builder, if they are doing well, but their nation is not doing well, then they say to themselves, I'm not doing well enough.
The well-being of everybody, defines my well-being.
Yes, so B, a nation builder believes in the greatness and the great potential of their nation. And more importantly, that their generation has what it takes to birth and actualize that potential. But nation builders also see, they commit their time, their energy, their resources to do everything that needs to be done to deliver the future of that country.
I'm trying to get it. When you tag yourself a management
management consultants, I can understand that. When you tag yourself a leadership expert, I can understand that. But when you tag yourself a nation builder,
Yes.
I haven't met too many people. In fact, you are the president of a company that brands itself as a nation building foundation. Yeah. Tell us a bit about what you do.
Well, you know, it's very interesting. I started my business as a management consultant, and then went into the area of leadership about 16, 17 years ago. Okay, and it's very interesting that I did very well and succeeded very well in management consulting, and then I had an encounter in 2004 where I believe that God spoke to me and spoke to me about the greatness of the nation, but told me to go and begin to raise nation builders. I didn't quickly heed to the call. I really was still, I kind of like was doing it on the side with my, my management consulting as my focus until 2011. And God said to me one day, he said, look, my son, you will never, ever out-succeed your nation.
Wow, that's
he said he said to me, and these were things that I got to learn even through a particular experience that I had traveling outside the country. And when I had gone, very successful consultant, I was going to speak in the United States, and I got to Gatwick, and I was flying upper class. And to cut the long story short, they separated myself and a few other very distinguished couple and put us aside just because of our green Nigerian passports. And they were looking at our visas, and I mean, this was a visa we had traveled on so many times, and we were treated like that.
Just
and the lady said to me,
it's
just because of where we're so sorry. And when I got on the plane, I noted down, I said, ordinary citizens of great nations will forever be treated better than successful citizens of failed states.
Wow.
And the second thing I said was, I said that individual success in the midst of collective failure will always be despised. And this is one of the greatest challenges that we have as Africa, because, somehow we come from a we generation that delivered independence to almost all of African states, to a me generation that thinks, okay, if I can do all right, it doesn't matter how well everybody else is doing.
Yeah, but Africa is changing, Mr. Fela. I look at the narrative of African rising economically, but there is also the African rising in terms of democracy.
Absolutely.
Look at issues like in the 80s, late 80s even, there were only 3 states that had what you could call a fair multi-party election. That was Botswana, Mauritius, and Gambia.
Yes, indeed.
But today, almost every country in Africa has some form of election. Never mind, it's from down here to up there, from very, very fair to manipulated. But it's almost become a swear word in Africa to say you had a coup, whereas before a coup was the norm. You know what happened in Zimbabwe recently, where the military were almost excusing themselves.
Yes,
it wasn't a coup. It wasn't a coup. It's become,
but there was just an intervention.
That was the word.
It wasn't a takeover. It was an intervention.
That was the word. You see, there's a trend happening, fella, in Africa. There seems to be a wave, and it also. I have a figure here. It says for the last few years of 42 countries that featured term limit in terms of this is when the government should finish. Yeah. There were only 13 that was overturned.
Yes.
That means people came to the end of their term and many times succeeded by an opposition. Yes. That is unusual. Yeah. What do you see?
I think that the light of democracy is shining in the dark continent of Africa.
Wow.
And we're lighting up that continent. And it's important that democracy should do so. Look, democracy is not necessarily just a Western ideology. Democracy is a way of giving power to the people. And when the people have power, power is spread out and it doesn't become toxic. Whenever power is concentrated in the hands of a few, it will literally make them powerful. And I didn't say power F-U-L, I mean power F-O-O-L.
Full up of power.
No.
Power become fools because of power.
Yes, because you see visionaries who became powerful and all of a sudden they lost their vision. They couldn't even see the kind of challenges that the people were going through. You see great listeners who became deaf to the cries of the people. That's what happens when you have power and you have ultimate or absolute power. It corrupts absolutely. But what we've seen in Africa as we have moved along the trend is it's a very encouraging trend, but we have still what I call today, it's not full democracy yet, it's still what we call selectocracy.
Explain.
So selectocracy in my own view, and I coined up that word, is exactly what's happening
right now.
There's several
words you coined up. I'll come to another one soon.
It's really something that happens when you have a few people within the political party systems that still reserve the right to select who gets to become aspirants and candidates on their parties.
So you can't come into the party and aspire
exactly.
to...
So you have to go to those godfathers and bow down and sometimes cut oaths and do stuff like that. And this is one of the reasons why the brightest and best of Africa have not yet fully stepped into the political space.
Because the main powers, the ruling parties and the established parties are
still within the hands of a few power brokers.
So that they end up being the ones that select who goes.
And those people that are selected then end up bearing allegiance to those power brokers as opposed to the people. So what we will see, as I believe over the next maybe over the next decade for Africa, will be where we have full democracy, where most of the parties, ruling parties, big parties, established parties, will have membership rights, voting rights given to the members of the party.
Where there
not just delegates.
There'll be democracy now in the party.
That's right. Internal democracy, I call it.
That because you kind of change the real democracy where you have the system in the party that people can't actually democratically choose who represents the party.
And you know what the greatest consequence of that is? Is that most of the enlightened voters that will never collect money to vote for anybody who are not necessarily impoverished, they will never, ever show up on election day. So, go and look at the turnout of many elections in Africa. It's very low, because most of the people who are involved in the process of on election day are only there to elect those who have been selected. They were not part of the selection process. Therefore, most of the people who have the capacity to be able to vote without asking for any incentive, who have the ability to listen to vision, who have the ability to understand a roadmap. Most of those people were not involved, and therefore they stay away on election day.
That's voters' apathy.
Well, I don't even think it's as much of apathy as some kind of protest voting.
Protest voting, okay.
In other words, those who should be involved are saying, you did not involve me, therefore I would rather vote for nobody than vote for these people.
But you see, I think the reason why people like you are coming up is because there seems to be a faith rising that our vote counts.
Oh, yes, indeed.
I think our vote counts.
Oh,
in
yes.
the sense that, I can actually vote and expect it to count.
Yes, I think the last few elections and Nigeria especially, and maybe even Ghana, have shown us something that was very strange, that was pretty much never heard of across Africa, that incumbents could be defeated. In other words, a sitting president could run for an election and be defeated by an opposition. Now, there are many elections in Africa that where the party, there has been a shift or a change in parties or party administration. So an opposition party went into government. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that the incumbent was lost an election and surrendered it. We saw that in Nigeria. We saw that in Ghana. And that is showing that indeed, truly, votes are counted.
And that's one of the things that gives hope.
Yes.
Mr. Fela, we would stop at this point and go on a short break. Viewers, don't go away, because when we come back, I want to explore the role the church is playing in this. And I want to ask you, Mr. Fela, how you think you would not lose your values when you go into this space you've never gone to before. How you think what you did with the management and you don't like being called motivational speaker. Will come and tell me why later on. But we're going on a break now, viewers. We'll come back soon. Don't go away. Thank you.
Do you have any opinions or comments on today's subject or any other issues in your country or around Africa? We would love for you to join the conversation. Please send us your comments by WhatsApp video, voice or text message to the number on your screen, or via Facebook, Twitter or email. We may be able to include your text, audio or video comment on a future show.
Welcome back, dear viewers, to this second segment of my interview with Mr. Fela Durotoye, who is running or raised up his hand to run if his party elects him. I think you've not had your process yet.
No, we haven't.
In next year's election, 2019 in Nigeria, and before we went on the break, Mr. Fela, we were talking about the changes in Africa.
Africa is emerging, sir, and it's going to emerge when the young people, especially the strength of a nation, the glory of a nation, I believe when the young people realize, I am a leader. I don't need to wait until I have a position. I don't need to wait until I have a title. I have gifts and talents inside me. I have what God has given me to improve my place, my state, and the lives of the people around me. And once they get that, that's it. Africa is coming out.
And I think it's this tune you play that resonates in the heart of thousands.
It's waking up the giant in them.
Yeah, and it's this tune that this Peter Piper plays that, and raising up an army that will probably go out through the gate and do something.
I hope that army goes to get their voters card.
Yeah, that's
because unfortunately they have not been doing that.
That's
important.
And
so we're working on that.
We're just mentioning here in Nigeria, everywhere you are in Africa, especially if you a believer, a follower of Christ, go get your voters card in your country. Vote in the next election. Don't just complain. Bring about change.
Shim, you know what I say about the voters card? The PVC is what we use in Nigeria. I presume it's the same all across the world. It's a permanent voters card. But beyond the permanent voters card, PVC also means the power to vote your choice. And you have the choice. You see, from the day God spoke to Noah and said to him, seed time and harvest will not cease, what he was giving Noah was the power to choose his harvest and determine his seed and plant it to make sure that harvest comes. You are the one who has the right to choose the future that you will live in and you would give to your children. It doesn't matter what country you inherited from your parents. You will not be judged by what country your parents gave you, but your parents will not be judged by the country that you give to your children. You will be judged by that. And so we have to accept responsibility to determine the future that we want and to be able to find out what must we do now. And the greatest thing you can do is you can go and vote. You must go and vote. Choose those who have the same vision as the country you want to live in. The one who have the kind of values that reflect the values of Christ, and more importantly, your values. And most importantly, choose the people who have the kind of roadmap that will get you to where it is that you're going. I think that's what
talking about the values of Christ, Fela, you are a Christ follower.
Absolutely.
Where does this...
I'm a child of God.
You're a child of God.
I'm a son of God.
When did you get born again?
I got born again in 1997.
Where were you at this time?
I was actually running my a master's degree program in business administration on the Obafemi Awolowo campus, one of the most prestigious campuses.
I was in Ife also.
Oh, great Ife, right? And so I was running that on Obafemi Awolowo campus, and this was in a place called Ile Ife, which many of the people in the Yoruba and the southwest of Nigeria believe is where the origin of the world. That was, some kind of mythical facts around that. But the point was, here I was, it was in between my semester. I was on the semester break between second semester and third semester, and I was lying down on my bed. I just woke up in the morning and I came into a presence. And you have to understand, I wasn't, before Christ, I wasn't exactly very Christianly. I owned a snooker bar.
All of us.
I owned a snooker bar. I used to drink a lot. I drank about 9 bottles of beer a day. I used to smoke about 2 packets of cigarettes a day. I was all of that. But I came into this presence, and it was very interesting because I knew who it was. I knew it was Christ. Nobody needed to introduce him to me. I just knew. And more importantly, when he started to engage me and said to him, I want you to follow me, and I said, why? He said, because I want you to take my word. I want you to believe in it, and I want you to show the world my word and my love. And I thought, oh wow, what is it? What is your word? And he said to me to look under my pillow. And you may or may not believe this, but I tell you no lie, sir. The Bible that my mother gave me when I graduated, which I hid under 3 suitcases down because I didn't want anything to do with the Bible. That Bible was under my pillow.
And you don't know who put it there?
It is impossible for anybody to have put it there. I was the only one living in the house.
Okay.
It is impossible. There's no way it could have gotten there except by Christ.
And
that became my encounter, and that was it. That was it.
After that, you turned to Christ.
I have never looked back. And I have become a man who have gone from just this ordinary human being. Somebody. You look at me. I'm not tall. I'm not short. I'm not light. I'm not dark. I'm not good looking. I'm not average. I am just an average. Everybody has a cousin that looks like me. And I used to say to God, why did you make me so average? And God said to me, so that no one else would have an excuse. He says, I want to show the world what an extraordinary God like me can do with an ordinary man like you.
I love that testimony, Fela. But the point is this: you're going into this arena that has been a pitfall, minefield for several. How is your value and your commitment to Christ going to stay the same as you go into this place? Have you counted the cost?
Well, yes, I have. And I said something to my team a little while
because
when I started this.
You talked about powerful.
Yes.
But this has also happened to Christians also.
Absolutely.
Powerful.
Oh, yes. And I think that, it is a very treacherous place. It's really a valley of the shadow of death. It's not the valley of death. It's just the valley of the shadow of death.
It looks like it.
Looks like it, smells like it, feels like it, but it's not. It has no death in it. Yeah. You're bringing life into that space. Okay. But this is the most important thing I want to share. I shared with my team. I said, look, if I lose myself and my values, then I've lost everything, whether I win an election or not. I said, but if I were to then lose an election and lose myself, I said that would be a tragedy. I said, if I were to keep myself and keep my values, but lose an election, I would have had a learning experience. I said, then if I won an election, it would be a miracle. Because people like me with my values are typically not the kind of people that are supposed to win elections. And that's a very interesting place because, first of all, from the onset, I have said to myself, this is not just about me winning an election. I know by God's grace I will win. But it's not about me winning an election. And the moment you get to the point where you don't have to win at all costs, the power that that whole system has over you slips. Because the only way they can deal with you is when you feel like you must win at all costs.
You're so correct.
In fact, it is winning at all costs that usually increases the cost of politics.
And it's this winning at all costs that prepares you to become a powerful person.
Yes, indeed.
We've been talking to Mr. Fela Durotoye, who is running or raised up his hand for his party, ANN. That's the
Alliance for New Nigeria.
Alliance for New Nigeria, for the next presidential election in Nigeria. Would unfortunately have to stop this conversation here. It's been engaging, it's been interesting. Mr. Fela, a last quick word, like in 30 seconds. What would you say to Africa?
I would say to Africa, Africa, you must seize the power of democracy to receive power, because until we are the ones that God gave power to reign on earth. That was what he gave us power to do. And the greatest power that we have today is the power of elections, the ability to cast our vote. Your elections is not just about voting for the worst of two people. It's about choices. It's about choosing most times your past or your future. There are many times when you look at the candidates, you see those who will bring you more of what you had before, or those who will take you into a future that you want. I want you to choose your future based on vision, based on the values, and most importantly, based on the roadmaps of those who offer themselves. And please offer yourself also. Don't let it be the darkness that you have to choose which one has more light in between. Let the brightness of the light of Christ shine through the candidates that will go through, and let the people who are carrying God's, he said the government shall be upon our shoulder. The government is upon your shoulder. Let us rise and carry the government. Let's deliver a great government and a great Africa.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fela. It's been wonderful talking with you. Dear viewers, we have to land this here. I've been talking to Mr. Fela Durotoye, who is a management consultant, leadership expert, as well as a nation builder, like he explained in the beginning. And he's also raised up his hand to run in the next election in Nigeria. We have been talking about our place, and I like the way you landed it, that we've been called to be the ones that, with Christ, carry the government upon our shoulders. We'll stop it here. Thank you, Mr. Fela.
Always great.
God bless you.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you.
That was Mr. Fela Durotoye that was at his residence, and it was quite, I really enjoyed that interview, and I hope you did too, because like I told him, we want people like that to be leading. Let's pray for him and the many other believers who are out there in the different countries of Africa going into positions of power. Let's pray that God will have his Daniels in our day. This is where we begin to wrap up for this week. Before I go, here is a word for this week for you. I'm taking it from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27. In the NLT, it says, instead, God chose those things that are considered foolish in order to shame those who think they are wise. And he chose things that are considered powerless to shame those who are powerful. You see, we are at a time in history where God is going to do some great things in your neighborhood, across your country, and all across this continent and in other parts of the world. I believe we're at a time of the great harvest, the final harvest. This is a time where God is going to be doing things that we've only read about before. But I want you to note something from this verse, which I felt God saying to me, is that he's going to use ordinary people. People who the world considers to be foolish. He's going to use them to do greatly wise things. People who the world considers to be powerless. People who have no connection. People who are considered to be like weak. He's going to use the powerless people to shame the powerful people. I don't know where you stand, and you might look at yourself that I don't count in what God wants to do. No, I just want to encourage you to position yourself by submitting to God, because God's eye is running to and fro Africa, and is looking for men and women, young and old, men who people consider ordinary. And if they can align their hearts with Him and say, Lord, here I am, use me, He wants to use powerless people to do powerful things. He wants to use ordinary people to do extraordinary things in these last days. And I encourage you to make yourself available. I'm Chim Onyebilama, your host. This has been another edition of Chimstalk Africa. I look forward to having you next week. Same station, same time. God bless you. And please, let's hear from you. Bye-bye.
This program is made possible by the generous financial support of believers just like you, who share our heart to equip the African church to engage the issues facing our continent. Your financial support will help us continue this important work. If you feel led to give to this ministry, please visit our website today.